Hello, and welcome to Precision Athletic Training CEU webinar. I'm Megan Hunt, the Vice President of Precision Athletic Training, and I'm happy to have you logged on today. Precision Athletic Training provides quality and convenient athletic training services for sporting events. We were founded in 2009 and began providing CPR and CEU opportunities for athletic trainers in 2013. We take pride in promoting athletic training and hosting lectures by athletic trainers for athletic trainers. Please note that the course evaluation form and assessment form are posted on the sidebar of the webinar client under the Handouts section. Take a second now to download this file, and after the webinar, please complete the evaluation and assessment and email them to me at mhunt@precisionat.com. Once I receive this file, I can then email you your statement of credit for the course. If you have any questions about this, please email me or call me at 781-366-1880 during normal business hours. At the end of the webinar, you will have a chance to ask questions and participate in a discussion. To keep things from descending into chaos, we're going to ask that you use the raise hands function on the attendees tab when you'd like to speak, and we'll unmute you one at a time to ask your questions or make your points. If you do not wish to speak, you can also type your questions into the sidebar at any time, and we will ask the questions for you. Our presenter for today's webinar is Jamie Doherty. Jamie started dancing at the age of 3 and continued through some of her college career. She has taught both dance and gymnastics. Jamie earned her Bachelor of Science degree in athletic training from Charleston Southern University and her Master's in Education from Old Dominion University in their post-professional athletic training education program. She has been working as an athletic trainer for over 10 years in a variety of sports and settings. She has toured with the Rockettes, Burn the Floor, Lord of the Dance, and Heartbeat of Home. Without further ado, let's welcome Jamie Doherty.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to start by talking about the similarities and differences in performing arts versus typical settings. So while we do this, we're going to look at the settings of performing arts versus typical, the setup, the chain of command, potential injuries that are different versus typical settings, and taping and bracing elements that have to happen in performing arts world. So just as an overview, I want to go over, in case we don't have any athletic trainers, we have people that are not athletic trainers on this webinar. An athletic trainer is a healthcare professional who meets the qualifications set by the state licensure or board of certifications and practice under the direct supervision of a physician. More than 70% of athletic trainers hold at least a master's degree. The services provided by a certified athletic trainer comprise of prevention, emergency care, clinical diagnosis, therapeutic intervention, rehabilitation, and medical conditions. ATT certified athletic trainers prepare an athlete to return to play from an injury with the focus on the specific demands of their sport. So typical athletic training positions consist of athletic fields and courts, sporting events, high school setting, collegiate settings, professional sports, and some road races. The non-traditional settings, which the NATA categorizes as COPA, which is the Committee on Practice Advancement, include clinical settings, industrial, military, physician extender roles, and performing arts. The COPA committee works on trying to increase the public's knowledge of these non-traditional settings, and they also have lectures and workshops at NATA conventions that help bring that education to other athletic trainers and to the public. Athletic trainers in the performing arts can be found in the following locations. Radio City Rockettes currently have 5 athletic trainers on their staff in their in-season. Cirque du Soleil has athletic trainers touring with them and locally. Cincinnati Ballet, Pittsburgh Ballet, and Louisville Ballet all have athletic trainers, and there are a few more ballet companies that also do. I just am not familiar with them at this time. Harkness Center for Dance in New York has a great athletic training program. Love the Dance, Burn the Floor, Disney, both Disney World and Disneyland, have athletic trainers working with their performers. Varsity, which is a company with cheerleading and dance, they have athletic trainers and athletic training students that work their camps and competitions throughout the summer and during the year. There are about 6 to 7 collegiate dance programs currently that have athletic trainers covering just their dancers. So it's separate from the athletic department. The collegiate dance program is the next biggest growing field for athletic trainers in the performing arts. More and more schools are noticing the need for them and for that potential job. So with the chain of command, it's very similar with performing arts to the typical setting. You have in your typical setting, you have an injured athlete. The athletic trainer does the evaluation. They discuss with the coach what the prognosis is. Can they return to play? Do we need to wait a little while? If need be, you refer to a team physician. And after we get the results back from the physician, we talk to the coach or the athletic director and find out the next realm of action. In performing arts, it's very similar. The performer gets injured, the athletic trainer does the evaluation. We have one extra step, which is we need to let the stage managers know. They actually fill out the workman's comp paperwork because they are on the job, so it's a little different with the insurance, therefore. We talk to the artistic staff, which is like your coach. They are the ones overseeing the show. If need be, we refer to our team physician. And then we have a discussion with our production staff, which includes your dance captain, your director, and anyone in charge of the setup of the show. So they are very similar in both realms. Okay, this I just want to get you familiar with the stage and how the wording is. So if the dancer is standing where that word center stage is, and they are looking towards the audience, what we call stage right in the dance world is to the actual dancer's right. And as you see, it also says house left on that same side, which is actually from the view of the audience, that would be the left. Okay, these are important terminology to know because when you're on tour and you're covering a show, your stage manager might call out, we have an injury up stage right. And that means you need to go to that top right corner to address the injury or where the person is. So as you would know, the area of where the goals are on a soccer field, knowing the terminology in the dance world is very helpful. Other differences with terminology per se is most dancers do not know what a squat is. Their rendition of a squat is a plie, which is basically the same thing as a squat that everyone else would know. Also, a calf raise is what they call a releve. So going up on their toes is what they call a releve. In typical athletic relations, we call it a calf raise. Knowing these terminologies are important because the dance world has not had many exposure to athletic trainers. And if somebody can come in and talk their language, you kind of are able to win over that dancer already because you understand their sport and what they do and you appreciate what they're doing. Other differences are or similarity is that we watch the choreography just like you would watch a game. We look for those potential injuries, what might be dangerous, what might be, okay. In the Radio City Christmas Spectacular show, there was a number where, it's a Christmas show, Santa Claus would go up on this platform, and he would pretty much belly flop onto the arms of 8 ensemble dancers. Well, this was also part of the choreography that I always wanted to make sure I was there on the side of the stage, just in case that didn't go right. We actually never had it go wrong, but it was a high risk scene and you wanted to be there. And there's other scenes, and as you watch the show, you're able to figure out what those scenes are. Athletic trainers and all stage managers wear all black behind the stage. This is so that you blend in with the curtain and you are not an eyesore when the audience looks on stage. If you can see the audience can see you. So having all black makes you blend into the background and not stand out as much. Doctor access, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. You have to have an overseeing physician. My overseeing physicians never traveled with us, so we would often have to have doctor access in each city for our dancers to be seen. So how this works differs from show to show. Some shows allow the doctor to come to the theater and do evaluations, and other shows did not. And that's something that you just need to figure out beforehand how you're going to address that. Oftentimes a show will give 2 comp tickets to a doctor covering in that city so that we have direct access into their clinic if we need be at the last minute. Because most cases, the athlete's going to get hurt in the show, which is about 8:00 p.m., and we want to be in there first thing in the morning. So being able to have that connection is very valuable. Documentation happens on your own. With the Rockettes, we had a SimTrack documentation system. With Lord of the Dance and Burn the Floor, I used all Excel and Word documents to keep all my documentations. And you want those documentations because you don't want anything to come back and haunt you in the future. So document it to save your life. Injury communication. We talked about that a little bit. Know that chain of command. It's going to change to vary from show to show. Who's really in charge? Who has the call that they're going to put a swing in or not put a swing in? So know that ahead of time. It may not just be your coach. It may be some other people. And how are they going to communicate with you? Most shows I had a radio that they would be able to call me and tell me where the athlete was injured. Quick change is something that a sporting event does not have. These dancers will have to change costume, and that will include their tights, their hair pieces, their costume, their shoes, their accessories, and all of that stuff, and that can take place as fast as 45 seconds. Most cases they have usually about 90 seconds, but there are some changes that I've seen that are 45 seconds. And that's a lot to do in 45 seconds because you also have to get to your changing area, change, and if you want a glass of water, you probably have to wait. And that's another element that's different in sporting events. Most performing arts shows will do their own pre-production or rehearsal 1 to 3 months before the show opens. And this depends, is the show brand new? If the show is brand new, then obviously we might go into a 3 to 6 month rehearsal period. Rehearsals are usually run for 5 to 6 days a week and can be anywhere from 6 to 10 hours a day. So you can just think of how demanding that is. And in these rehearsals, they are repeating the number over and over again, which can get into more chronic injuries versus acute injuries that you may see on a sporting event. Once the show opens, there may or may not be any practice or rehearsal. That will depend on the show. Show schedules can vary from 8 shows a week, which is your typical theater Broadway show schedule, to 18 shows a week. It all depends on the show. And all their shows are 2 hours. So if you just do the math, that could be very tough on one's body to keep up that show schedule. Therefore, sometimes the show schedule only runs for 2 or 3 months at that 18 show a week. Some things are different between show to show. Some shows are sit-down shows. What we mean by a sit-down shows is that will be like the Radio Cities in New York, and they stay in New York. Their rehearsals are in New York. Their theater is in New York, and they stay, and everything is there. It is more similar to a typical athletic setting because your medical team is close by. Your doctor may come into the athletic training room to do visits. You will often find that your stage directors, stage managers, they are all the same people year after year, and you get to know them, they get to know what you can do, and you have a great relationship. And hopefully your emergency action plans stay the same. You know what they are. Everyone knows around you knows what they are. Traveling shows means you're changing from city to city, and that can be anywhere from 1 to 2 days to 1 to 2 weeks to every month. And in those cases, you have to deal with new local crew, new local wardrobe, and different venues that you have to figure out where things are. Where is your ice machine? Where is the AED? Where is the nearest exit? How is the ambulance going to come if someone does get hurt on stage? And that is something you need to figure out at each city. Some of the durations of the runs of the show can be 1 month, 3 months, or a year, or anywhere in between that time frame. Some shows run for multiple years. And changing cities every day is a little grueling, and then you need to figure out and plan ahead for the next couple weeks to know what your schedule is going to be, who your overseeing physicians are going to be, and everything, all the details that you need for each city. The next couple slides are some pictures of our stages and the different locations our stages have been in. This is the arena tour of Radio City's Christmas Spectacular about 4 years ago. And we were actually in arena settings, and they, like a hockey rink type of a setting. Everything you see on that stage traveled with us. So the actual stage, the steps in front, all those things, the curtains, all that stuff traveled with us. We were usually in a city for 1 to 2 days, and the crew would have to load all this stuff out and load it all in every night or every 2 nights and go from there. You can see the black curtain kind of extends through half of the arena, so you couldn't see like that end of the behind the scenes and where all the changing and stuff would happen. So this next slide is a picture in Taiwan when I traveled with Lord of the Dance. This is an outside arena, and you can see the scaffolding that was in here kind of near where that gold lettering is, and dancers would dance on top of that. When you have outside arenas, you have to take into account weather, which includes rain and wind, which we did have to deal with a couple times. One time we did delay our start for the rain, but as you can think, things may be still slippery. Dancing on those high platforms, there was probably like 3 or 4 people on each section. They were starting to move, and it was a little scary to watch. But it was, I mean, it's structurally sound. They all check it and stuff like that. But outside conditions do tend for a whole nother variable when you're talking about theater, as you can imagine. The next slide is the rehearsal setup for what we did at Taiwan. We were just in a gymnasium. They had a floor that they brought in for us to rehearse on, and those are some of the scaffoldings that we would practice on. And The area was small. There's only a few dancers in here, but there was actually about 50 dancers in this show. I think 50 to 60 dancers in the show. So that area would get pretty congested. The costume area was off to the side in this green area, and they would do their changes and rehearse the whole show. And we rehearsed in Taiwan for about 3 days before we went on. But the whole show setup was already nailed down, and all the dancers knew it at that point in time. So as we're talking about, we know that the rehearsal time can vary from show to show, okay? With Rockettes, the rehearsal was all done before the show opened. With Lord of the Dance, they would do a thing, they would rehearse before the show opened, but they would also, every day before the show, they would do what they called a placing of the show. And that was before each show, probably about an hour before. And what this meant was their show had a rotating schedule. So for each dancer, the show was pretty much changed every day on what numbers they would be in, what they would be casted in. So they knew they knew all the numbers, and it would change, and they would say, you know, you're in this number, you're not out, groups A in, groups B's out. So this would actually help a little bit if somebody was injured, because, you know, they did have a complete alternate for that number if they needed to, or actually multiple alternates if they needed to. And also, you never knew if a dancer would be dancing 3 numbers in the show or like 8 to 9 numbers in the show. And it was a little hard to keep track of because you never knew each dancer's show because it changed every day. With Burn the Floor, they would mostly do their rehearsals before the show opened, but if the choreographer came on to meet us in a city, they would do rehearsals additional before the show so that they could change numbers and clean up the numbers in there. So that would mean that they might rehearse for about 5 hours before performing 2 shows. So that just takes added wear and tear on the dancer and time and energy for the dancers and everyone involved. With the Rockettes, their show, if somebody got injured, they had 3 swings that would swing on and cover if a dancer got injured. Lord of the Dance and Burn the Floor would often re-block the show, so they would change their show if somebody was actually out, which is a little different. Means that everyone's dancing in different places and everyone's dancing in different numbers and things like that. That was often with Burn the Floor, would happen in the middle of the show if somebody was out. So that was a little tricky, and you always felt bad if somebody couldn't dance because you knew it was changing the whole entire show and what everyone was seeing in the audience. With the union, the only union show I worked with was the Radio City Rockettes. And the differences in a union versus a non-union is most union shows have certain setup of how long the dancer can dance before they take a break, or traveling, how far they can travel before they have to take a plane. And that just helps the dancer or protects the dancer so that they're not overseeing everything. With the length of each city, we talked about that. It can vary from 1 to 2 days to anywhere a month in each city. So with the shows, with the athletic training room coverage, my athletic training rooms never had an appointment unless it was something that really needed to address and the dancer got to me the night before. And if usually I had an appointment, I would come in earlier than my schedule open time slots. For rehearsals, I was at the show anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes before the start of rehearsal, and that would depend a little bit on each show. For show cover, I was at the theater anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes before, prior to call. So they had to be in their dressing room at a certain time. So prior to that time, they had to be in their dressing room. I was an hour before, and I would remain available throughout the entire show, just like you would a sporting event. And then after the show, usually about 30 minutes for icing or any necessary treatments to get them so they can dance again the next night. And that was a little bit flexible as needed. But this, as you can see, is very similar to what you would do in a sporting situation in a collegiate or high school setting. Here's a couple pictures. The next couple slides are pictures of athletic training rooms that I've had. And you can see on the top right picture, I had very little space compared to the bottom picture where I had lots of space. And as you can see, each athletic training room that I was in, I never knew the space limitations I was going to be. And it would just vary from time to time. So here's just a couple more pictures, just so you can see, set up. These are mostly, I had 2 tables that I would travel with most of the time, but I wasn't able to set them all up all the time, just because, or spacing. And it was just every time you went to a city, you had to load all this stuff out and load it all back up. And then, so being there for a month is valuable. Being there for 1 to 2 days is a little more tricky to set up and take down. Okay, so for the next couple slides, we're going to talk about the potential injuries during load out, load in, any moving parts of the stage, backstage, and costume considerations. And we're going to talk about those on the next slides. So load in and load out is what happens when the crew guys, most of them that travel with you, some of them may not, they may be local crew guys. This is when they take that first stage picture you saw and they put everything on a truck and they drive it, they take it to the next city and they set it all back up. These pieces are large and heavy. Some of them can be thousands of pounds, and this load in and load out happens within 2 to 6 hours. They're trying to get everything on the truck so they can get it to the next city, and the crew guys can fly to the next city and they can do it all over again the next morning. These usually happen at the end of a day of a show. So as you can see, these hours for the crew guys are long. And the potential injury is if someone is walking by that does not know what the crew guys are doing and walks in front of one of these heavy pieces, and the crew guy tries to stop the heavy piece from moving so they don't run over the person. Not only does the crew guy get hurt, but the potential the person in the way gets hurt. So, making sure everyone's safe in these areas and moving these heavy pieces, and talking about body mechanics and all that stuff is key for your crew guys. Some of the locals don't know where things are supposed to go, and that can get difficult to keep the steadiness and the speed of the loadout that they want to. And again, I said the time frame is usually anywhere they want to try to load out in 2 to 6 hours in most cases. So with the moving parts of the stage, every stage is different on what moves and what doesn't. There are some stages that have elevators that go up and down that will bring people onto the stage and take people off. Turntables, there's actually a spinning wheel that part of the stage will move and rotate. Sometimes there's a double turntable, so one goes one way, one goes the other. You have orchestra pits, which are in the front of your stage and just a big open pit. On each of these elevators and turntables, there's a ridge where the stage meets the elevator meets the stage. So there's a little ridge. So in all these elements, you have to think, and when you're rehearsing the show or teching the show, you have to think worst case scenario and what are you going to do? If the elevator doesn't go back up, okay, or it goes down when it's not supposed to, and someone falls down that elevator, what is your emergency action plan going to be? If you have a dancer who's in a costume and their seeing ability is limited and they step one step too far into the orchestra pit, what is going to happen and how are you going to do an emergency action plan for that orchestra pit fall during a show. So are there other ways to get to the orchestra pit? Are questions you need to find out. Are there other ways to get to the elevator shaft? And how is your best response time to get to those places during a show? The ridges in the stage, oftentimes heels can get stuck in the stage. So you just want to make sure, you know, those are as smooth as possible so that doesn't happen, and have the dancers know where those ridges are and know where those turntables are and know where those elevators are, and make sure everyone is aware of that before the show starts. We also had in Lord of the Dance, we also had fire in our show. We had explosions. So knowing where those dancers can stand and can't stand when those explosions are going to go off. This is especially key if you have new people coming into the show. So backstage is as choreographed as on stage. There are props that need to be moved on and off the stage, and they get moved pretty fast. And what they do is they have a staging area for the props before they go on the stage. So there's a designed area that's marked off with tape on the wings of the stage of where a certain prop is going to go before they put it on the stage. And being in the way of these areas, of the staging areas and the storing areas, can cause injury to you, delay the show, and just cause havoc for everyone involved. The storage area for props, so after it's been staged, it's been put on the stage, it comes off. It usually has a staging area to come off to, and then they store it. Okay, especially with the Christmas show, there are lots and lots of props being used. Some of the backstage areas are really tight, so some of the props, they will flight, so they will put up in air and store up in air. So obviously when they bring those down or put those up, nobody wants to be around that area for potential injury. You also have to worry about the entrances and exits of cast members and how fast those cast members are going to come off the stage so they can do a costume change and prepare for their next number. With the 45 seconds, you can imagine as soon as they hit the wings, they're off and running to their changing station so they can get back onto the stage. So being in the wrong place at the wrong time can injure not only you, but your crew guys or your cast members. So knowing that choreography, knowing should I be on stage right, should I be on stage left during certain numbers or during certain acts of the show is helpful and is a good thing to figure out during tech rehearsal when they're setting and doing the show and marking things out. So costumes can be a big concern for some of the dancers. Some of the costumes that the dancers will wear can weigh as much as the performer's weight or more. We had bears in our Radio City show that they would be in a full bear suit with a head, and you want to make sure that head to shoulder distribution is even, that it's not too far forward or too far posterior, that it balances on those performers comfortably so they can dance in it. 3 of our bears in the show would be on point shoes. So they'd be up on the toes of their shoe, also in a bear costume. And you can just imagine how much that changes their center of gravity. Some of those bear costumes I know weigh at least probably 80 to 90 pounds. And they're heavy, especially your big bear costumes and stuff like that. So, and we had other costumes in the show. There was one year we had this big, huge flower poinsettia that was like a shoulder pack that the performers wear. And not only did they have to wear it and dance with it, but when they started that number, they were in the flower boxes sitting bent over so that you couldn't see them as they were prepping the number. And they would have to sit there, I think it was for a minute, with that weight over their shoulders and, you know, making sure they're comfortable and making sure they're not getting injured. Wearing the costume is just as difficult as keeping them safe and injury-free throughout the numbers. The bear costumes had mesh eye holes, and some of the other costumes have really small eye holes. You want to make sure that they can see enough so that they can dance and not go into that orchestra pit by mistake. Their peripheral vision is very limited while they're in those costumes. During the show, especially with Radio City, there are little tape marks all over the stage, different colors for different numbers, and you want to make sure the performer can see their spike mark so they know where to stop on the stage, or which number across the front of the stage. There's numbers with 0 being in the center of the stage and going out evenly throughout the sides all the way out to, I believe, 28 in our show. So each movement in the show, they were supposed to be on a certain number, a certain line, and making sure they can see those so they don't hit another performer or, you know, accidentally hurt themselves in a different way. The biomechanics with the costume, a lot of the costumes do restrict their motion, but what we want to make sure is that they are still able to do what they're need to do while they're dancing. So can they still kick their leg up, or is the crotch of the costume limiting that ability? Or is there a problem with the raising your arm up? So being able to be with the costume department and having a good relationship with your costume department so that you can say, hey, they are not able to do this. Is there any way we can alter this and help? And that helps if you can go during the costume's fitting and make sure the dancer can do the required move in that costume. And if you can get it when they do the costume fitting, then it is easier to fix than mid-show. Because in order to fix a costume mid-show, it has to be done after show hours, and the costume department doesn't always work as long during those off hours, and it needs to be ready for the next show. So that all has to be checked out. Also, another time to check in is during dress rehearsals. That is when we are, you know, rehearsing but using costumes. We go a little slower. You know, you can check and make sure they can see. Does any need to be altered? We have often put a towel backpack type of a thing around a dancer's shoulders and neck to help raise the head and take pressure off the shoulders. But being there during the costume fittings or checking with rehearsal, checking their limited restriction can help reduce the risk of injury when the show opens. My costume department was really good at helping me address things. We actually had a dancer have a stress fracture in her heel, and when she had this stress fracture in her heel, she had to go on these point shoes. So these are point shoes. There's a hard toe box in the front. There should be nylon backing to this whole point shoe the whole entire time. So what our wardrobe department did was they cut out that nylon backing, and they re-put in elastic, which was more forgiving on the patient's heel and allowed the patient to keep going and doing her show for the rest of the run of the season, which thankfully was only a few more weeks, so she was able to keep going and finish out her run of that show. But if you have good connections with your wardrobe department, they will do good things for you. You just have to talk to them, brainstorm with them, talking about what the problem is. They might have ideas that they've done on other shows also. Taping and bracing in the performing arts is a little different than the typical settings. In rehearsal, you have more options because tape can be seen, but in shows, no taping or bracing can be seen by the audience. Oftentimes, the taping and bracing needs to be approved by the director or dance captain before the dancer goes on stage. Oftentimes, they may, if they think the tape job will be fine, they'll let the dancer do one show. They'll watch out from the audience, and alterations may need to be made for the second show. Possibilities of different type of taping techniques that can be used Kinesio tape is great because it's one layer, it's tan tape, and it usually will help enough. Leukotape is another one, and there's a tan thin flex that is actually made that we have used often in performing arts. Makeup can be used to help cover different skin tones and blend in better with the dancer. And then you need to start thinking outside the box. Can the costume be altered to allow for a taping? If they're wearing gloves, can you cut the spacing between two fingers and put two fingers together and re-sew that glove up? Other things are for taping is, can you tape between numbers? Do they wear pants for one number that they need a lot of support in, or long sleeves, and you can tape and have the tape be there for the number that they need? Oftentimes you need to set up how that's going to be arranged ahead of time, because you got to remember that the dancer only has about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to change, and that includes doing the tape on or off or whatever you need to do. And these are often things that needed to be remembered with taping and bracing in the performing arts. So some of the differences with traveling is, these are the shows that are not your sit-down shows when you're somewhere 1 to 2 days or up to a month. Some shows you'll always be in a hotel. These two pictures are of my sleeper bus that I was on with Lord of the Dance. This is the front of the bus, and the picture on the right is of the kitchen area. We actually had a stovetop. We had drawers for refrigerated material and cabinets above, and we also had, everyone had their own drawer underneath the benches that they could keep food and supplies in. If you were to turn around and look at the other side of the bus, there was 12 bunk beds, so 3 high, and sleep 12 people that you would be in. Each of those bunk beds were kind of actually, not bad, because they had their own TV in there and cubby holes and outlets. So it was fairly comfortable in traveling size. As you can see, there's tables and cushions and couches in the front of this bus also. There's also a section in the back where there's a couch and a TV back there also. So when you think about sleeping on buses, some buses are a lot more, like tour buses are a lot more comfortable than you see your typical coach bus sittings. You also want to think about how far you might have to travel in a regular stagecoach bus to get from city to city, or are you going to take a plane? Okay, and all of these elements just add to your travel as you tour with shows. Other things to keep consideration is your access to food in stores. If you are in a hotel, are you walking to the theater and have no access to a car, and therefore you're relying on public transportation and taxis to get food access, especially if you're somewhere for a week or a month and get places? Also, how are you getting around the city? If you have to get someone to a doctor's office and you have no rental car, what is the rules for the touring show of how you're going to get there? Do you have to rely on public transportation? Will they pay for the taxi rides? What else can be? Will they rent you a car for the day if you need to do that? Also, your overseeing physician is not typically with you, so making sure you can get in touch with them by phone if need be, and also who are your physicians that you're going to use in each city. They're going to change very frequently. We talked about injury tracking and the different ways to track on the road. And the biggest thing is know the laws for the athletic training state in each state that you're traveling to. Some athletic training laws only allow somebody to practice with an outside company or like another sports team. It goes the same way for 2 weeks, and some are a month, and some are 8 weeks. So you may want to check that out before you start traveling, so you know, if I'm going to be there for 3 months, am I going to need a license to practice in that state? And just something to think about as you keep moving forward. Other things that change in each city is all that stuff on the picture of the right was what I toured with the Rockettes. And I was in charge of setting all that stuff up and actually taking it all down and leaving it exactly like that at the end of each city. So when I got to the city, all that stuff would be in my room. I never knew where my room is. So the first day it's like a hunt to where am I going to find my stuff? How close to the theater, how close to the stage am I going to be? How close to the dressing rooms I'm going to be? Finding everything and setting up that athletic training room, setting up the hydroculator. The cold tubs on the picture of the right can be quite interesting sometimes to set up. As you can see, I'm trying to use the shower to fill that tub, which probably took about 4 hours to fill that tub because that shower spigot right there is not aiming very well into the tub. So it's different from city to city, and it's kind of a fun adventure. What am I going to have to do, and how am I going to have to set these things up? When we were draining these ice tubs, we would often use a sump pump to drain them into the drain in the bottom of a shower or a sink. You just have to be aware that sometimes those drains are not as fast as the sump pump goes, and then you start overflowing things, and nobody really likes that. So other things is you saw the size of the athletic training room differs from city to city, and you never know where you're going to be. Emergency action plans, I try to get to each city and set that up with the stage, the main stage people that work at the theater, and say, what do you do if an emergency happens? Who do you call? Do you have a direct line? Is there an EMT in the house? Because of a lot of theaters, there will be an EMT that covers the audience. And if so, I've often tried to meet with that EMT and say, hey, if I really need your help, like I need your oxygen or I need some of your supplies, would you be willing to come back and help? You know, and more than likely you go and talk to them. They're totally fine doing all that stuff. Make sure you have set your policy on hotel treatments. This can get tricky as some people don't want to stay at the end of the night of the end of the night to come to the athletic training room. You finally get back to your hotel and you get a call that somebody got hurt in the show. Okay, so make sure you know how you're going to address that. Are you going to go to their hotel? Are you going to tell them to see you in the morning? Obviously, if it's severe, you're probably going to go anyways to their hotel room, but having those policies set ahead of time just makes it cut and clear what is and what isn't allowed. And that just helps everyone in the whole big picture. So just like any other athletic trainer, you need to prepare for anything. I always kept a small kit on the side of the stage that had first aid supplies, and I would make sure that is stocked up, usually every couple days. Makeup cover-up is good in case you do have to throw that tape on, and it's a dancer that's darker skin, have that there, have a couple shades. Obviously, you want tan colored tape because that's probably what you're going to put on if someone does get hurt. Everywhere backstage is dark, so you need flashlight at all times. You never know when a dancer is going to walk off the stage and say, is this bleeding? And you can't see a thing. And they're going to run by you saying that. So you're like chasing them, running and trying to catch up to them. It's quite interesting. So anyways, know where you're going to be or where you can do evaluations on the side of the stage. So it may not be convenient to just do it right when the wing where they come off, because as we talked about, props go back on and props come off, so you don't want to be in the way. So kind of pick out your little side spots that you can do a quick evaluation if need be. And we talked about you need to wear black at all times so that you're not being seen by the audience and you blend into that curtain. Find out how you're going to be able to be getting in contact by the stage management. So are you standing next to them during the whole show? Your stage management are the people that are calling the show. They're calling the curtains to come on, the lights to come on, the props to come on. So, you know, if they know something, they're probably going to be the first to know if someone's injured. Some shows will have multiple stage managers. You'll have your main stage managers and then assistant stage managers, usually on each side of the stage. Most shows I did have a radio that they could contact me in case I was not right by them. And know your place. Know that you want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So don't start trying to help too much where it's not needed. So medical challenges. So finding your medical coverage in each city can be difficult. My best approach was with these shows, these dancers are professional athletes. So I would try to find medical coverage that has worked with professionals first. When that is not possible, I then reach out to medical coverage that has worked in a higher collegiate setting, and then if not, at least some high school athletic settings that they've covered. And this goes into just, having them be able to understand the capacity these dancers are dancing in. And in most cases, I would try to have the doctor come to the show the first night or two of the shows, especially if I was in a city for a length of time. So then when I brought an athlete in, they knew what the show demands were. And they didn't think, oh, this is just a little dancing show. They're not really doing anything. And they could see how intense the dancers dance and make a better decision. Can the dancer dance or not? Okay. How are you going to set up appointments with your medical coverage in each city? Do you have a head contact person? Oftentimes the office manager, I try to get their number and be able to call them the night before and say, I need to get someone in at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We have this issue. And a lot of times it was good, especially if you were able to set that out at least 3 or 4 weeks in advance before you got to the city, and know where you were going, know who you were contacting. Oftentimes doctors would give me their phone numbers. Following up with doctors got tricky, especially if you were only in a city for anywhere from 1 day to, 2 weeks, because that meant, are you going to be able to order an MRI and actually get the order in, okay, and approved, because remember, this is workman's comp. So the order has to be approved by workman's comp before the imaging can be done. And then it needs to be read all in the same city. This is really tricky when you're only there a day or two. Workman comp changes or orders will change city to city, or laws will change city to city. So it's important to know what those laws are in each city. We rehearsed in South Carolina for Radio City, and in their workman's comp laws, chronic injuries were not covered. So that is a good thing to know when going to different cities, and what is covered, what is not covered, and therefore. Long-term care, what is going to happen if that dancer is going to be out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? What is the show's policy? Some shows will just send them home to do their rehab and PT at home. Other shows that I worked, I had a girl with a meniscus tear. She had the surgery. I did her whole entire rehab. She never set foot in a PT clinic, and she was back dancing before I left the show. And that was big for them. I don't think they understood the whole realm of how much they saved. I tried to show that to them and tried to prove that to them, but that was a different type of scenario that they had never dealt with before. So other considerations is there an established emergency action place in the theater already? And how do you fit into that emergency action plan? Making sure the locals know that you are the medical coverage, and that if somebody gets hurt, they don't just immediately call 911. They call you first. And we've had that happen before. The locals didn't know there was a medical coverage there, and somebody fainted, and they immediately called 911 without thinking. And, I get to the scene probably like, a minute later, 30 seconds later, and take over, and they already got EMS on the way. So make sure that's set out. People know that you're there, know what you can do, know what your capabilities are, And, if you do need to activate that EMS, know how to go about doing it and how to call and what the numbers are. Some shows I travel with an AED. In that case, all my stage managers and all my company managers knew where that AED was at all times. It stayed in the same exact spot in my road case and never moved. That was because if there was a need to use it, they were the ones going to get it. Obviously, I wasn't. So we would touch base on that every year and make sure they knew where that was. If not, if you're using the one in the theater, make sure you know where it is, and make sure at least one other person, one stage manager, knows where that is. If you can make sure they all do, that's even better. So when it gets to who has the final say, the performer can perform, this gets tricky. Most shows, the only person that can hold a performer from dancing is a doctor in a doctor's order, or the performer themselves. They can call themselves out. This has to be set up ahead of time. As an athletic trainer, I was not able to hold a dancer from performing, even in severe cases. The performer either had to make that decision themselves, and I had to convince them that, or I had to get a doctor to say they could not dance. Also, know of HIPAA. Everyone around you wants to know what's going on with this injured dancer. Know what you're able to say, know what you're able not to say, and keep that HIPAA privacy for the dancer. So the biggest thing an athletic trainer can do in the performing arts is demonstrating your value. So educate your performers about workman's comp, when to file a claim, when to file out appropriate paperwork. Some you don't have to file a claim. You can do like a pre-claim, so it's on file if they need to claim later. Check with your human resource department or other departments about the procedures. How do you go about filing a claim? What do you need to know? And as I said, the state laws for workman's comp is different in each state. So know how long you are allowed to file or not allowed to file, okay? And difference between just reporting medical or disability. International has a whole new considerations. Know how that you're affected while you're traveling internationally. And other insurance coverage. What is work-related? What is not work-related? Is an illness considered non-work related? Do those dancers have coverage or do they not have coverage? And that is good to keep in mind. So one of the things you want to do is to show your worth is you want to reduce the workman's comp costs. And that's the biggest value you can bring as an athletic trainer to a touring company or any other company that uses workman's comp, is that if you can reduce their workman's comp costs, you put more value on yourself. That means you're doing more in-house prevention and rehabilitation, on-site and acute medical coverage, okay? And keep those stats. So if you can say, I did this whole PT rehab for this meniscus injury, and this is what it would have cost you for 3 times a week PT for however many weeks, and you paid none of that. That shows your worth and your value so that they may keep you on longer and see how you're saving them money. So if you're interested in getting involved in the performing arts, there are a few different ways. The NATA convention has a pre-conference workshop the day before the convention starts. And this is for performing arts. Usually it either meets half a day or a full day. And a lot of athletic trainers in performing arts will be there and presenting. And the topics change from year to year, seeing what the interest is. And then also at the convention for NATA, the COPA, the Committee on Practice Advancement, has a meet and greet. And this is also with the military, with the physician extenders, and it's a whole meet and greet. You get to walk around, talk, and see. That in the past has been the night before the conference starts. I don't know when it is this year, but you can check into that. PAMA is another association that has a lot of athletic trainers, medical professionals that are involved in performing arts. That conference this year is in New York. Okay. There's also a LinkedIn group for performing arts athletic trainers and a Facebook page for COPA if you're interested in finding more about how to be involved in, as a performing arts athletic trainer. And here is just a quick wrap up of you know, where I've been and with Radio City and, you know, my name in the program and stuff like that. And I would like to thank all the people that have been helped me influence me and get me involved in performing arts and working with performing arts for all their help. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Jamie, for your time and insight into the world of performing arts. Just a quick reminder, please download the evaluation and assessment file from the handout section of the side panel of the webinar. Please fill these out and email them to Megan at mhunt@precisionat.com. We do have some questions for me to read at this time, or if you have any questions and you want to use the raise hand feature or type them in the question section, you can do that now.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Great. Jamie, you spoke earlier about having a dancer that wanted to kind of hide their injury from the director. I was wondering where your responsibility lies in that type of situation, liability-wise and job security-wise.
That goes back to HIPAA. I can't tell the director that a dancer is injured unless the dancer wants me to.
Oh, interesting.
So, yes, unless the only case that it comes different is unless the dancer cannot perform to their capabilities and it's affecting the show. So if it's affecting the show and they've filed a workman's comp claim, then I can talk to the director. I still usually try to get approval from the dancer, but that's where it gets a little tricky in that type of a setting.
Thank you.
I have a few questions to read as well. Do you treat crew injuries as well as dancer injuries?
I can treat some crew injuries. If it's long-term, I usually refer the crew guys to local PTs or stuff like that. It depends how long-term the injury would be and how much time I have. I will not treat a crew guy during my regular hours for the athletic training room because those are scheduled for the dancers.
Okay.
Local crew guys I am not allowed and not covered by my overseeing physician.
Okay, what do you usually see when you do treat the crew injuries? Like, is it typically more chronic stuff or more acute stuff?
It can be a little bit of both. More chronic, though, with the heavy lifting of all the staging elements is usually what happens.
Okay. And how is the process different when you're treating dancers versus your traditional athletes?
As in treatment-wise?
Yeah.
So nothing's going to change. I mean, you're still going to, an ankle sprain is an ankle sprain.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're trying to get that dancer maybe back faster if possible. But the same ice, you know, stim, we had stim units, we had ice machines, we had hot packs, you know, all the treatment stays the same. It's more just how fast you need them to get them back and how much they can tolerate and still dance at the same time.
Awesome. And the last question I have to read is, what's your favorite thing about working as an athletic trainer in the performance arts setting? And what's your least favorite thing?
Probably my most favorite thing is just being on the side of the wings and watching those dancers perform and doing what they love, and being a part of helping them continue to be able to do what they love. Least favorite is probably all the travel. I mean, I like the travel. The changing every day or two to every city gets a little difficult after about 6 or 7 months. So.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions before we wrap up? Don't believe so. Okay, so thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. We do have an evidence-based practice live event on April 10th on concussions, featuring Christine Bogg from Harvard, Dr. Thomas Buckley from the University of Delaware, and Dr. David Howell from Harvard. For details, please go to our website, www.precisionat.com. And don't forget that you can save 20% through Thursday on our promo code NATM16, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. And that's a wrap.